Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, the starting point of for the topic I presented today was discovery of a curious case in the manuscript 137 from the Vatican Library in the beginning of Mark. So this manuscript contains Gospel accompanied by the Catenae. In the beginning of Mark, the first scholium incorporated in the exegetical series is repeated in the body of the text following two prologues. In the passage indicating here in the introductory pieces the order of two Gospels, Meta Matthew, Marcus, or Evangelistis, is obviously highlighted by the corpus or by a reader. So today I am going to present several cases where passages, the material from the introductory pieces, preliminary pieces of the Gospels or the Apostles' books are used, reused, reproduced by the scholars in the series of the Catenae, especially at the beginning of the Catenae. Here is an example of a Catena manuscript, the number 12 from Paris, Bibliothèque Nationale, where two similar texts are found in the introductory part to the Gospel of Mark, and the other integrated as the first scholium in the exegetical chain. So here we see the introductory pieces we can call the short preface, and that is the first scholium of the Catenae here. And is Marcos Evangelistis apo tu propheticum pneumos tu exipsis tu sepionis misanthropos in achine episato. We see the same text here, and then later we can read also in Thirteenth icona to Evangelium Declion here, the Decnis here, the same text, it's in Thirteenth icona. So the text is Mark began with the prophetic spirit, with the prophetic word of Isaiah coming from high, showing a veiled image of the gospel. As a short preface, so also contains the information about the contact between Mark and Paul, Ipotheto, and Romi. So specifying that the text was dictated by Peter. This detail is not reproduced in the first scholium of Catenae. Is the expression winged image, the Rutikine icona, is a source probably for the creation of the eagle symbolism related to Mark, not to John, as specified, for instance, by an illustration here at the beginning of Mark. We see the symbol of eagle related to Mark, not to John. Yeah, broader tradition. So why I suppose that the text of the preface has been copied in Catenae and not the opposite, from the Catenae to the preface, to the introductory pieces. There are two reasons. Firstly, the transmission of the preface, of this short preface, is attested as early as the 9th century. So from this manuscript, I mean, the practice is the number in majuscule manuscript 34 from Cambridge. There we have one of the first attestation of the short preface. And the formulation of this preface also is more fixed than the formulation of the first scholium in the series of Catenae. So it's the principle of majority of manuscript and the stable tradition of the transmission of this formulation. Here, just to give another example of how this preface is presented in manuscript without Catenae, you see the photo of new discovery taken in the Caracalla monastery a few weeks ago. And so it will soon receive its number as a Kurzgefasste list. This preface is combined with a widespread subscription, where we also read that this gospel was written Romaici. Grazie the Romaici in Latin, metà 12 exit, it's an ellipsis to Kileo. Yes, sorry. A version of another short preface to the Gospel of Mark, and which can be removed and become a subscription to the text of Mark, sets up another symbolism for the evangelist, the calf. We can read in this short preface. Yes, Petru, and before that, and homeomaty Moscow. So this new version of short prefaces, attested only from the 11th century, is not found as a part embodied in the Catenae. Another example, so now the case 2, another example of the relationship between the introductory pieces of the Gospels and the first scholia in the Catenae was identified at the beginning of Luke, at the top of slide. At the top of slide, the codex number 19 from Paris, the scholium at the beginning of Catenae affirms when the Gospel was written 15 years after the Ascension by Luke, who was influenced by Paul, listened to Paul in order to write, and he was his disciple. So it's a very curious, just in the beginning, in the margins of the Catenae, we have almost very classical short prefaces, can be subscription also to the text, to kata Lucan, hypo Luca apostolo. It's a very curious formula to kata Luca, and also added hypo Luca. So like a formula kata Luca, it's not enough to say kata Luca, but if they added hypo Luca apostolo, and then we have a relationship keutos Lucas, hypo Pavlo, to Evangelion, this synagraphs of Mathetism Pavlo. And so this text incorporated in the scholia, in the Catenae, can be figured also as a preface, in this case, as a preface at the beginning of the continuous commentary without marginalia, known under the name of Titus of Bostra, the 4th century. The first citation of this short preface, the source for the material in the Catenae can be this source, this short preface from the 9th century. Here again, the adaptation has taken place in the same sense. From the preliminary space, introductory text is integrated into the beginning of the Catenae. And then we have here example of the 14th century manuscript from Paris. This preface is copied among the introductory pieces. So this the same manuscript we've seen with the Catenae of the 14th century. So here in the beginning of Catenae, we don't have any information like in the previous manuscript, but we have only the short prefaces where it's not moved and not repeated in the margins of the Catenae. Paul's influence on Luke, Ipigorefi, Hypo Pavlo, so this influence on Luke is demonstrated in various iconographies. Let's now look at the Catenae at the beginning of the Catholic Epistles. The first scholium, Anonymous, evokes the term of introduction, Prooimion. Yeah. So it's just an example of one manuscript. We have a dozen of manuscripts with the same series of Catenae. And so here, introduction explained that when each of the apostles sends a preface, so which the apostles is writing, he sends a preface to the epistle. He's showing his character, like Iacobus, Theouke, Kyriou, Isu Christou, Vulus. So of course the principle, just why I'm quoting this example, that the principle of having an introduction is therefore emphasized by an exegete. He is an anonymous exegete. Obviously, is not. It doesn't mean that the apostles. It's not the apostles who wrote the prologues to these books, but just the first sentence. The first sentences in their epistles are called, according to the Catenae, to this scholium, also prologue, Prooimion. Now we turn to the last example, which is the most complex and shows how the texts interlaced between the introductory pieces on the Gospels, the introductory text to the Praxapostolus, and the particular passages of the scholia attested in the Catenae. Here in this codex 2754 from Münster, the 11th century, between the list of Kephalia and the beginning of the Gospel to Mark appears a diagram that groups the names of the 12 apostles together with short texts about their missions and the places of their martyrdoms. The order of the names follows the reading of Matthew's version and not Luke's, but with some alterations of name at the end. The layout deserves special attention to appreciate how the 12 are linked in the same frame, of unique representation. Here is another diagram witness contains the same text, but this time placed between the list of Kephalia and the beginning of the Gospel of John, not of Mark. The layout this time places all 12 disciples in the same folio. So it was a new discovery from Metamorphosis. To identify the source of this text, let us take just one example of an apostle, Bartholomew. So Bartholomew, we can read. So that is an extract, from diagram here. Bartholomew, Indis, tis Columnes, Evangeliary, a lot of emphasis. Iris from Christon, Ekimife and Urbano Poli, is Megales Armenias. So Bartholomew preached Christ to the Indians, people called pious, and he died Urbano, in the city of Urbano, in Great Armenia. It turned out that this text, in an abbreviated form, is taken from the material attributed to Dorotheus of Tyre, or even Epiphanius, both of 4th century. So the material is known like a Dorothean material, and we found, for instance, this text in the manuscript of Paris to 250. So with the type where we see Dorotheus, Archbishop of Tyre, an antique and spiritual man who became martyr. And then in this text, we can find the same passage, just the beginning, Indis, Bartholomeus, Indis, tis Columnes, Evangeliary, Ekthesis from Christon. We have here more information that not repeated in the diagram. Evangelion, very important, but the copies did not find this information and useful in the introductory pieces. I don't know why. I will tell you later about this. Well, the name Dorotheus is mentioned by Eusebius of Caesarea in his ecclesiastical history. So, in a particular group of manuscripts which contain Catenae, a set of texts under the name Dorotheus is placed as a preliminary introductory pieces at the beginning of the Praxapostolus. So, in the Dorothean material, so here above we see the same manuscript. So, in the rest, what is following the text, the list of apostles here, and after the description of the 12 apostles, we read a lexicon of the names of the apostles translated into Greek. For example, in the same codex, we read on Bartholomeus, Ios Cremasas Idata here. Ios Cremasas Idata. Son, it's difficult to translate. Son of one who suspends the waters, son of a water bearer. Well, the passage with the names of the apostles in their translations into Greek was copied by a letter hand in the manuscript of Paris 37, so the Gospel with Catenae. So this passage with the names of apostles is a lexicon copied by a letter hand among the preliminary pieces before the Gospel of John and following hypothesis. So it also turns that this dictionary of the names of the apostles appears in the margin of Catenae. So it must be there to be specified in which collections on the passage of Luke where the 12 apostles are named. So it's on the chapter 6. We have the same passage from the Dorothean list integrated in the Catenae. And then this text is is reproduced probably from the Dorothean material rather than from the Catenae collection. But both hypotheses, can have place. If you're still following me, we have retraced an adventure of passages from the Dorothean prefaces on the Praxapostolus to the introductory pieces of the Gospels, and from the preface to the marginal Catenae. Before going to conclusion, I would like to quote you a remarkable introduction at the beginning of Matthew. Here, this introduction comes from Nikon, the monk Nikon of the Black Mountain, added by a later hand in the Codex 37 from Paris, which characterize in allegorical way the nature and the objective of the Catenae. We can read this passage. Actii biblos tuterium tas endolas, que testutum herminias perieche, que oster tis Chrysoprocos sinos, dialitum te margaritum tenium exifasmenos, olem vitrudem con character to Christianismo perieche. So this book of the Lord contains the precepts of the Lord and their explanations, and like a gold woven robe sewn with precious stones and pearls, it contains almost the entire feature, the entire character of Christianity. So it's a very valuable note on the Catenae and also a new image. So how can we now call not Catenae but Solinos, Sinos? So it's not Stira but Sinos accordingly to Nikon. The variety of content of the introductory pieces is manifested by an abundant terminology used in the titular apparatus of these pieces. Especially until now, we retain for hypothesis, the Latin translation Argumentum, but in fact, according to the content of this introductory text, the term must be translated only as a preliminary piece. It's not Argumentum, so it's another significance of this term. So we see the different terms that can categorize the content of each of these introductory pieces. And then about the idea, so what was the purpose and functions of these preliminary pieces that also integrated in the beginning of the Catenae. So what I see now, so it's especially to highlight the connection of the writer to the great authority, like to Christ, family of Christ. Sometimes we have the first preliminary pieces about to Jacobus, brother of God, especially to the apostles Peter and Paul. Then to summarize the content of the book, important idea is to include the book in the scriptural canon, and then to introduce a symbolism of the authors, what we seen at the beginning, eagle, calf, and then lion, about the image of Mark. And then another idea also to provide historical context, because we see the information about the data, about the origin of the writers. So establishing the gospel and apostle canon, it's seen through the church authority, and also at the same time historization and symbolization of the writers and their books. And just to give you some outputs of this paper, of this research, within the framework of the present contribution, I am limited, of course, to provide only some examples of the interconnections between the prologues, prefaces, and Catenae collections, in particular the beginning, if it concerns a project to edit all the introductory pieces in order to apprehend the impact on the classification of the manuscripts, it will be essential to investigate and take into account, the beginnings of Catenae. That is the main idea. So if we need to edit all the introductory pieces apart, so we must have a look at the beginning of Catenae, just to don't miss the important information that can involve and input the entire tradition. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Maxim, for this presentation and all this information. We have about 9 minutes for conversation. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, ask now or online.
In particular, like the example of people of the background with his work called the paratexts. And in fact, in modern terms, this is what we would call a correlation, because it's again a compilation excerpts from different authors, grouped according to topics. But the Byzantine is not distinguished between a correlation and what we call a correlation with our Catenae. It seems that in their eyes it was all the same genre. Yes, so this one was doing in the 11th century, the late 11th century, the same thing that the Catenae was doing earlier on.
Yeah, but here it's very curious, because in this case we have only the collection of Catenae, and then only I can come back. It's only the collection of Catenae, and then just a passage from, it's not from the Pandecta here, from the Nicanor.
But it's the introduction to the Pandecta. This refers to the, after he refers to the Pandecta, or to the text that which is by Nicanor.
But in this context, it's understood like which book, it's about, because we don't have the text of Nikon.
It can refer to any compilation. Of theological content. But it's a very problematic case. So it's overlaid between, as you said, perfectly, between the Providential and the Catenae. But so it's it's exactly between the biblical world and Byzantine world. Here it's really it's fusion in two traditions.
So thank you for the very interesting presentation. And so I think you talk about J 2050, right? During your presentation. And it happens to me to came across this manuscript for my research on Romans, and I found that actually J 250 got the same expanded prefatory material on the Twin Epistles with J 424, which is I think theological Preface 302 from the Österreichische Bibliothek in Vienna. And the same manuscript also got, quite interesting, an expanded compilation of Byzantine texts at the end of the manuscript. And apart from that, they also got the same text of the Catena on the Prologue, which is an application of later development. So have you configured this manuscript? Could be interesting to maybe.
Sure. It was very, sure. Thank you for this remark. I just presented very shortly, but of course I have a long list of all this combination between Byzantine stuff and classic, more classic. Yes, exactly. But we can at every time check together just to not miss any of these cases.
I agree about your purpose, historization, authority, scriptural canon. Sometimes also perhaps just curiosity. What the name of Bartholomew is, what does that mean? Sometimes. Sure. I think also it's probably we can see here it's an influence of the Greco-Roman idea. It's especially to highlight how to understand the election and so on. I was thinking about this. So can we really place the the presence of this Dorotheen material to the 4th century or later. It seems sometimes it's a pure Byzantine Renaissance, even to the 9th century. But if we have some relevant elements before the 9th century, so we are completely sure that this in entire way, this pseudo-Dorotheen material was from the beginning. I mean, from the beginning, from the 4th century, so more Greco-Roman material. But probably another hypothesis, it's especially after the obscure ages, so the beginning of Byzantine Renaissance. I don't know what do you think, because you are more expert than I.
I think it's a fusion of many sources which go down here and there. For example, there's a little detail that was it Mark wrote in Rome in Latin in Rome. It's curious.
Yeah.
He wrote in Latin. That is attested in Syriac, Peshitta manuscripts in the 5th century.
Yeah, yes. No, but I mean, about the inscriptions, subscriptions, the origins, yes, it's from the 4th century. I don't think we are almost sure that is the ancient tradition, but especially for the pseudo-Dorotheen material, because we don't have any critical edition. I think it's a very important thing to produce this edition and to understand, because this material is transmitted in very restricted corpus of manuscript. That is also curious, because the Eusebian material, they're a huge corpus, but Dorotheen material, very, it's like just one input, so it's very, very restricted. And why so? So it's.
Maxim, tell us a bit about the Prologue manuscript that you discovered. It's quite an interesting discovery.
About Caracalla monastery.
Caracalla.
Yeah. During the mission at the beginning of April, we discovered this manuscript, so we sent the information to. No. Just about the short preface. Yeah. I just showed the short preface. With short preface, But this, we have a lot of lacunae in this manuscript. It could be some Catenae, but we have a lot of gaps in this manuscript.
Probably time for one more question. You mentioned real quick, this is a curiosity of my own, but with a lot of this material, as Tommy says, kind of seems to be compiled from various sources. There seems to be a lot of relationship in what I looked at with sort of ancient rhetorical practices, wanting to establish sort of historical settings and things like that. Do you think it's just a borrowing from that more ancient practice brought back, like you're saying, it's a Renaissance, or do you think it actually that these sort of preparatory material may be older, even prior to the 4th century?
What I propose as a hypothesis, rather that's more ancient, and then it's a combination of different influences. So Greco-Roman material, educative, purpose, educative aims, and then also to establish canon from the symbolization, historization. I think there are a lot of objectives here at the same time, but at the moment, I think it's older than Byzantine.
Thank you again for your paper.
Thank you.